I've been raised. When I needed a Savior to save me, Jesus, you made a way. I was blind, but these eyes have been opened. Now I walk in the light. Every step on this road I'll follow. Jesus, you made a way. Sing it out. You are the way. You are the way. Lost and dead, but your love came to find me. Jesus, you are the way. You are the way. You are the way. You're the light shining bright in the darkness. Jesus, you are the way. Jesus, the only way. All my days are secure in your promise, never standing alone. You're the truth, you're the life, you're my future. Jesus, you made a way. I'm alive. I'm alive in the love that you give me, free to dance once again. You will lead me from glory to glory. Jesus, you made a way. You are the way. You are the way. Lost and dead, but your love came to find me. Jesus, you are the way. Jesus, the only way. Oh, we celebrate. You are the way. You are the way. You're the light shining bright in the darkness. Jesus, you are the way. You are the way. You are the way. Lost and dead, but your love came to find me. Jesus, you are the way. You are the way. You are the way. You're the light shining bright in the darkness. Jesus, you are the way. Hey. All right, come on, worship together. Let's take those coats off. Come on, we're going to go for in this room. Get a little bit of a bounce on, a little bit of a jump. Come on, let's celebrate. 1, 2, 1, 2. You are the way. You are the way. Lost and dead, but your love came to find me. Jesus, you are the way. You're the only way. Come on, let's lift him up in this place. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Whose love is mighty and so much stronger? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder? Who leaves us breathless in the of glory, the King above all kings. So come on, we say, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I'll sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I'll sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, worthy is the King who conquered the grave, worthy is the Lamb who was slain, worthy is the King who lift it up and sing this morning. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, oh, worthy is the King who conquered the grave, worthy is the Lamb who was slain, worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, sing, Jesus, I'll sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, we celebrate, oh, we sing in thanks and praise for the cross, for the life you give. We can only worship you, Lord. How majestic, how wonderful are you. Praise his name. On the cross of Calvary, your heart was torn to bring us peace. You gave it all, Jesus. The mystery of majesty, broken for our liberty. You gave it all. the Lord evermore. I will sing of your great love forever. The star that shone the brightest night, when earth fell dark, the heavens cried, behold our King, Jesus. Oh, behold our King, Jesus. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. I will sing of your great love forever. Praise the Lord evermore. I will sing of your great love forever. Yes, I will sing of your great love forever. We crown you King. We crown you King of majesty, our hope, our everything you hold, the victory forevermore. We crown you King of majesty, our hope, our everything you hold, the victory forevermore. Yes, you hold the victory forevermore. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. I will sing of your great love forever. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord evermore. I will sing of your great love forever. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. Yes, I will sing of your great love forever. Yes, I will sing of your great love forever. Yes, I will sing of your great love forever. Sing of your love. Oh, sing of your love. Praise his name. Praise his name. Praise his holy name. Oh, my soul. We crown you King of majesty, our hope, our everything you hold, the victory forevermore. We crown you King of majesty, our hope, our everything you hold, the victory forever. Come on, make this song your song this morning. Majesty, our hope, our everything you hold, the victory. This is Jesus. We crown you King of majesty, our hope, our everything you hold, the victory forever. We crown you King of majesty, our hope, our everything you hold, the victory forevermore. We crown you King of majesty, our hope, our everything you hold, the victory forevermore. Yes, you hold the victory forever. Jesus, 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 Jesus. Just sing that name. Jesus, 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 Jesus. Yeah, let it rise up in this place. Just sing that name, Jesus. The name that brings healing. Jesus, Jesus. Brings salvation. That brings rescue. Jesus. Brings freedom. Jesus. 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 So praise the Lord, oh my soul. I will sing of your great love forever. Praise the Lord evermore. I will sing of your great love forever. Yes, I will sing of your great love forever.
You're Spirit, come. Spirit, come. An authentic move of your Spirit, Lord, is what we long for.
Longing in our hearts.
It's what we long for. We wait on you, Spirit of the living God. Let's just begin to actively wait on the Spirit of God. Allow him to stir in your heart a new song. We don't want to hype anything up. The Spirit of God is at work here today and he's moving. We just want to wait. We want to give him some space. Yeah. We wait on you. We wait on you. Yes. No more hiding. No more hiding. No more hiding from your presence, Lord.
As we were praying last night, I just had this real sense that the Spirit of God wants to breathe life again and bring life where there's been depression, where there's been sadness, where there's been boredom. And you know, the Spirit of God brings life. He breathes his life onto dry bones and something amazing happens. You know, Jesus didn't come to make bad people good. He came to make dead people alive. And so can we just, as a posture, as a way of saying, God, we're all in 100%. You know, don't want to leave this conference not having been touched by your Holy Spirit afresh, not having been led to Jesus once again. And all that he is, all that he means to us. So can we just, St. Paul talks about this raising up of holy hands, and it's a way of saying, God, I'm all in. All across this room, come on, let's raise our hands. And let's sing this out, this desperation cry to meet with the living God once again, to see his kingdom come, to see revival, to see his kingdom break out in our communities, in our families, in our friendships, in our workplace, in our schools, in our universities. Just begin to cry out. Begin to cry out in your own words. What do you want to see? Bring those things to the Holy Spirit this morning. Break out, break our walls down. Spirit, break out. Go and declare it. Heaven come down. Oh, Spirit, break out. Spirit, break out. Break our walls down, yes, Lord. Spirit, break out, yes. Heaven, King Jesus. King Jesus. Stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Sing that with us. Stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Breathe on me, Holy One. Come reveal your wonder now. Open wide my eyes to see. There's so much more. Jesus, you are where it all begins. Your beauty calls me deeper in. So sing, stir, stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Breathe on me, Holy One. Come reveal your wonder now. Open wide my eyes to see. There's so much more. Oh, that's the truth. There's so much more. 'Cause Jesus, you are where it all begins. And your beauty calls me deeper in. So stir a passion in my heart. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Oh, stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Stir a passion in my heart. Jesus, Jesus. It's only you we're chasing now. It's only you we want. It's only you we need. But Lord, we know we need you. Lord, we know we need more. Give us more faith, Lord, we pray. To stand on your promises, the things that you've said to us, to our communities. Give us faith, stir that up. God, give us sight and vision. Give us dreams to see beyond the current reality. Dreams to see what your kingdom breaking through could mean. Stir that up, God. Lord, where we've been lifeless, where we've been passionless, God, we know that the only source of this hope and this passion and this joy can come from you. Stir this up. Stir it up in us. Over England right now, we need to stir passion in my heart. Sing this over America. Let it overflow. Oh, let it overflow. Sing, let it rise. Let it rise, let it rise. Holy fire burn inside. Let it rise, let it rise. Oh, for Jesus. Let it rise, let it rise. Holy fire burn inside. Let it rise, let it rise. Oh, for Jesus. So stir up passion in my heart. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Stir up passion in my heart. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Jesus. Stir up passion in my heart. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Yeah, Lord. How we need it. How we need it. Stir passion in my heart. Let it. Just sing as your prayer this morning. Sing as your prayer. Stir. Let it overflow. Oh, stir. If you know you need it, sing. Stir.
Sound of our soul.
sound of the heavenlies. Oh, can you hear the angels singing over this place? We're joining in with heaven. Oh, tune our ears to your song, Lord. A renewed passion for you. Oh, that fresh water. Of all of heaven. Just see the Holy Spirit all across this room. Just receive Him afresh. Receive Him. I just really feel like we need to sing out in the Spirit. And, you know, again, St. Paul talks about this as a prayer language that we can use together to express, to go beyond our earthly words. I just believe the Holy Spirit is really here, moving, can see Him doing a deep work in people. And just this language can just rise up and just encourage those who are, you know, comfortable with it. Let's lead one another in this moment. You know, these moments where we go beyond the songs and the set lists and everything. These are magical moments. And so I just want to encourage us, let's just begin to sing out. Sing out in the Spirit, in your own language. If you're from a different country, just sing out your own song. Come on, don't be shy. That's it, just raise your voice. You might just want to sing the word Jesus.
Jesus.
There's healing in this moment. There's healing for people in this moment.
Swing wide the gates of heaven. Open the floodgates of heaven.
And Father, the sound of your people, let it be a sweet offering this morning. The worship of your church, your leaders, Father. We are your people, God. We love you this morning. We're here for you, God. We're here for you, God. Would you say that this morning? Just say, we're here for you, God. Can we just give the Lord some praise this morning? Thankful for these guys, for Luke and Anna, and Nick and Josh, Worship Central. Thank you guys. Really happy to introduce our next guest this morning. Several years ago, actually probably more than a decade ago, some of our leaders in the Christian music industry were really concerned about the spiritual health of their artists that they were working with and their writers. And Al Andrews, who has a ministry called Porter's Call, they came together with our industry leaders and Al, and they set up a program through Porter's Call and through Al and his ministry that anyone who needs counseling, anyone who's in crisis, anyone that needs just to sit down and talk will be able to come free of charge and to be able to receive counseling. There's been hundreds and thousands of musicians and artists that have sat in Al's office and poured out their hearts, and he's helped them put their lives back together. And so I'm really excited that he's here with us this morning. Would you help me welcome Al Andrews?
Good to see you. So the author Annie Dillard once said, if you invite God into worship, if you really want to invite him into worship, you better watch out. In fact, she said, a wise worship leader would encourage people to wear crash helmets and life preservers, because that's what can happen. So I'm not really exactly sure why I was invited to speak to you this morning, because I don't have the credentials, really. If this were a baseball team, well, I don't think I'd be chosen in the draft. After all, I go to an Episcopal church in Nashville, strike one. We have stained glass windows, and you can't block out the light, so we don't have a screen, and so we have no words on the screen, and we have bulletins and hymn books, strike two. Our music team consists of 2 acoustic guitar players, a dobro player, a fiddle player, and a stand-up bass, and no one is plugged in. Get that? There are 500 people in the church, no one's plugged in, and they all lean into one microphone. And we don't have cool lights that go like this and fog machines, strike 3. But maybe that's why I was asked. Because you have plenty of folks that can help you with all that. The nuts and bolts of the thing you do. But I think I'm here to talk about you, the person who does the thing you do. I'm going to start out by saying thank you. You have a huge and weighty job. It's a big task. And when you walk up on the platform every Sunday morning, and when you stand in front of a community of broken people, there is something you're called to do that no one else is. So thank you. And every Sunday, Every Sunday or every time you lead worship in the congregation, there are people who live in a world that's not their home. They were born in Eden, but because of a snake and a foolish decision, they now live in a garden that's not Eden. And things don't work in that garden. It's really hard, in fact. They're thorns, they're thistles, they're rocks. Relationships are difficult. The curse that reminds everyone that we need Jesus is alive and well. An old Scottish preacher once said, "Be kind to everyone you meet, for everyone is fighting a great battle." Isn't that true? So when you look out on your congregation, and as you lead, you must assume that is true. That sitting out there is a woman who lost her baby, a man whose wife left him, a woman who walked out on her and the kids, whose husband walked out, someone who lost her job, someone who's having an affair, an executive who drinks too much and can't admit it, a guy who has a porn addiction, a high school student who's planning a suicide, someone who did something last night that they're ashamed of, a guy who thinks he has AIDS, someone filled with anxiety, a dad who's feeling guilty because he yelled at his kids on the way to church and he dropped the F-bomb, a woman who found out she had cancer, another who just buried her father. And that's just the first 2 rows. I'm very serious. I know I'm sounding like a kind of a depressing therapist, but I promise I'm not. I'm really kind of a fun person. But I want you to know it's true that person by person, even in this room, of course in this room, in every room that you lead worship, everyone is fighting a great battle. Don't you believe that? If you live in this world, you are. And you have the weighty privilege to stand before them and lead them. And the question I want us to talk about this morning and answer is, when you walk up on this platform, what do you bring with you? And I'm not talking about guitars and set lists and microphones. I'm talking about your hearts. What do you bring with you? And does what you bring with you meet broken people? I want to tell you 2 stories this morning, and both are true. Story number 1 is the story of the Franklin expedition in 1845, one of the early expeditions to the Arctic. They were trying to find the route from the northern Arctic to the Pacific Ocean. And in those days, it was their version of going to the moon. No one had done it before. It was uncharted territory. They didn't know what to expect. So Sir John Franklin and 138 men and officers set sail in 2 3-masted ships. Each ship carried an auxiliary engine and a 12-day supply of coal for the projected 2 to 3 year journey. And instead of extra coal, which they had plenty of room for, each ship had a 1,200-volume library, a hand organ that played 50 tunes, full china sets for each one, cut glass wine goblets, and sterling silver flatware. And the officers had flatware that was inscribed with their names and their coat of arms. The ship set out with great fanfare and celebration, and Franklin said to the cheering crowd, "The highest object of my desire is to faithfully perform my duty." And 2 months later, obviously in the summer, a traveler came back and reported that he'd crossed paths with the ships, and they were in great spirits, and he was the last person to see them alive. For many years after, their frozen bodies were found strewn across the hard, icy landscape, some as far as 60 miles from the ship, and strapped to them backpacks filled with plates, books, and silver. And by the way, the only clothes they took with them were their Navy uniforms. There were no survivors. Story number 2. Her name was Friedel Dicker Brandeis. She and her husband, both Jews, lived in Prague in 1942, where she was an art teacher. There was a day when the Nazis told everyone to pack a suitcase with what they wanted to take with them, and their limit was 100 pounds. In a few hours, they would be packed into trains and taken to the Jewish ghetto in Theresienstadt. Most people packed valuables, pictures, and some clothes. What would she pack? A few personal items, and then the rest of her suitcase was filled with art supplies, colored pencils, crayons, brushes, and some tubes of paint and paper. She knew where she was going, and most likely she knew she'd never come back. And she also knew that where she was going, people were in extreme trauma, brokenhearted, fighting great battles. And she knew that art could help them. And when she got there, she was confronted with hundreds of extremely traumatized children. When the families arrived at the ghetto, children who slept in their own beds the night before were immediately torn from their parents, who they would never see again, and taken to the children's barracks. And when they got to the children's barracks, the boys, brothers and sisters, were separated because the boys were here and the girls were here. Can you imagine a deeper trauma for a child? And somehow, Friedel was given permission to teach art to over 600 children. And they could express what was on their hearts, and they could paint of another day, of butterflies, and they could remember family and pets. And they drew pictures of their surroundings, but always in the corner there was a flower or a cloud. They dug deep into their tiny souls and came alive in the midst of great sorrow. And the very few who survived 60 and 70 years later reported that she gave them hope beyond imagining. And before she and the children were sent to Auschwitz and killed, she collected all of their drawings and put them in 2 suitcases and hid them in the attic. And years later, those suitcases were found. And you can see those pictures in books about her and in a museum in Prague. 2 stories of 2 individuals who decided they knew what they needed for the journey, what they would bring with them. One intent on adventure and comfort and fantasy and fame, packed his bags with an eye on his own needs, and blinded to his foolishness and arrogance, he led 138 men to their deaths. And one, with her heart set on healing, packed her bags on behalf of others and sacrificed herself and her own comfort for the sake of hundreds of traumatized children. My point is this: every time you step up here as a worship leader, you bring with you the bags that you've packed. And it is either for you or for the broken people in front of you. It is either dishonest or honest. Those bags are either filled with pretending or reality. Not long ago, I was a guest preacher at a church. And as I was waiting to get up to preach and sitting on the side of the stage, I realized that I was wearing a white shirt and light-colored khakis. And they were almost the same color. And I thought, oh my gosh, I look like an orderly in a hospital. And I was embarrassed. And I wondered what people were going to think of me, because everybody else on the stage was cool. I mean, really cool. And their hair was kind of like, whatever. And then I got up to preach, and afterwards I wondered if people liked what I said. So did you hear what I brought with me? Did you hear it? I brought with me a self-consciousness, a self-assuredness, a self-awareness that in essence didn't give a rip about people, but I was concerned about what they thought about me. It wasn't real. Years ago, an artist called me about 9 p.m. one Friday night. I was on vacation sipping a little icy drink with an umbrella in it. It was like Coke. And here's what he said. Here's what he said to me. Al, I'm having a panic attack. The opening act is playing, and in a half hour, I'm supposed to go on, and Al, I can't. I just can't, he said in a stressed out voice. Al, I'm not doing well. I've had some rough months. There's some things I've done that I'm ashamed of, and I'm having some serious doubts about God, and I don't think he even hears my prayers. I don't know what I believe right now, and in less than 30 minutes, I have to go on stage and sing these songs of faith that I've written and lead people in a time of worship, and I can't do it. I feel like I'll be telling a lie, and he cried. Have you ever felt like that? Worship leaders? Of course you have. Half hour before you walk out, you're standing back there and you're going, I can't do this. I know what's going on. I don't know what to do. And I don't have Al Andrews' phone number. I felt it too, and I have my phone number. So here's what I told him. I said, buddy, I think you have 3 options. You know, you don't have to go out there. You can pass the word to the opening act to keep it going. And it'll be a real hassle, and your manager will be really mad, and you'll have a lot of explaining to do to a lot of people, but you don't have to go. That's option 1. Option 2 is you can go out there and pretend, just lie your way through the night and get it over with. Option 3, I have a thought. And don't tell anybody I told you this. I'll deny it if you do. But what if you went out there tonight, sat on a stool, and had a little conversation with the crowd, and you said this: folks, it's really good to see you. Thanks for coming out. But could we have a little chat? Here's the deal. I've had a couple of really hard months. Really hard. And frankly, I've had some doubts about God. And sometimes I wonder if he can really hear me. And sometimes I wonder if he's even there. And frankly, I didn't want to come out here tonight because my songs are songs of trust and belief and hope and assurance. And right now, I don't feel a lot of that. But here's what I want to do tonight. When I wrote those songs, I believed every word of every song with all my heart. I really did. And so tonight, I am going to sing. And I'm going to sing those songs by faith, believing that what was once true will one day be true again. And then I said, say this after you say that. I imagine there are those in this room that may be feeling just like I do. And if you do, will you join me by faith? He said, okay. And when I hung up the phone, to tell you the truth, I did not know which one he was going to pick. And it would have been okay if he'd done any one. But he picked the third one. He did just that. And it was one of his best nights ever. Amen. Because what was in his backpack? What did he pack with him? Truth, honesty, a vulnerable heart, a broken heart, and the belief that there were those out there who needed what he had to say. What a difference between a guy who's worried about looking like an orderly and a guy who tells the truth. It would have been so much better if I would have gotten up that Sunday and said, you know, I put this thing on early this morning and I realized I look like an orderly and I'm really embarrassed about that. I'm so sorry. And then I would have gone, it would have made all the difference in the world. It would have taken away my stupidity. A while back, there was this worship leader, and he was pretty famous. And he was in a dark place, and his job was to write songs and teach songs. You might be familiar with such people. You are them. And but he was in a real dark place. And so he wrote a worship song being true to what he was feeling. And here is some snippets from that song. Lord, you are the God who saves me. Day and night I cry out to you. May my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. I'm overwhelmed with troubles and my life draws near to death. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. But I cry out to you, Lord. In the morning my prayer goes before you. Why do you, Lord, reject me and hide your face from me? From my youth I've suffered and been close to death. I've borne your terrors. I'm in despair. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. You have taken my friends and my neighbors. Darkness is my closest friend. Amen. You're probably thinking, sing that in church, buddy, and you're going to be working in Starbucks on Monday. The singer-songwriter who wrote that was Heman the Ezrahite. And you find his song in the Bible, Psalm 88. And here's the strangest part. The Psalms were written to be sung. That means that one day, and more than one day in the temple, they sang that. Can you imagine it? You have taken from me friends and neighbors. Darkness is my closest friend. Thank you. Can you imagine singing that and then the preacher comes up and goes, thank you. Can you believe it? Isn't that funny? When we think of Psalms, we think of praise you, God. Da, 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 da. Who would ever sing that? But they did. What in the world? Friends, it's in the songbook. Psalm 88. One of the two Psalms in the Bible that does not end well. Usually Psalms are something like this. God, I don't know where you are. I can't find you. But I know you'll show up. That's what they're usually like, you know? And the but I know you'll show up is the part we sing, usually. That's how it goes. I think he said, folks, it's been a tough season for all of us. And I have a song to teach you. And he taught them a song, and the hurting, broken people sang it because they expressed, like the children in the concentration camp, what was going on in their hearts, and somehow they were comforted. And they knew that Psalm 89 was on the way. And Psalm 89 is, I will sing of the Lord's great love forever. With my mouth, I will make your faithfulness known through generations and generations. I don't know how you're going to do it, friends, but I challenge you. If you lead in worship, you have to figure out how to sing Psalm 88 and Psalm 89. Because if you only sing Song 89, you're not touching most of the people in the room. Because everyone is fighting a great battle. Everyone. The other day I talked with a friend of mine who leads worship, and I talked with him about packing his bags, and I just said, what do you put in yours? He says, Al, I put 4 things in. During the week I pray with the people. For the people I'm going to lead, and I pray with my team. 2, on Sunday morning, I don't spend time backstage praying with my worship team because we did that during the week. I spend time walking around in the lobby and standing around in the congregation and talking with people and listening. I pack that. Thirdly, I decide before I get on stage that my role is that of a good waiter in a restaurant. And that's the spirit I go on stage with. I found out the food they need, I serve it to them, and for the most part, I back away from them, checking on them now and then, and letting them enjoy the feast. And then he said, finally, I like to lead from behind. I said, what do you mean? And he told me the story I knew, and he said, you know, the American church invented worship leaders being up front. In the old country, the worship team, the worship leaders led from the back balcony. I want to ask you really quickly, what would change in your life if you went home and the pastor said, hey, you know, we're moving y'all up to the back balcony? I tell you what would change. What would change for me? I wouldn't worry about what I wore. I wouldn't worry about my hair. I wouldn't be self-conscious. I wouldn't worry about what you're thinking about me. I wouldn't be aware of people's response or non-response. I'd follow my heart and do what I felt the Lord was saying. It'd be different, wouldn't it? But that's not going to happen, so you don't have to worry. But what I do want to say is, I would love for you to think of your hearts being as if you're behind. Does that make sense? As if you're leading from behind, and it'll change you. It'll change you. Brothers and sisters, yours is a high calling, and I honor you for it. Broken, hungry people who are fighting a great battle need what you bring with you. And with your broken heart, pack your bags well and lead. Amen.
Nothing can for sin atone. Hope is found in you alone. Sin and death are overcome only by your precious blood. Nothing good that I have done, no praise of mine could be enough. All my striving ends in vain, my righteousness found in your name. Only your blood has the power. There is no no Precious is the flow. Oh, it washes white as snow. No other fount I know. Nothing but your blood. Nothing but your blood. Oh, precious is the flow. Oh, it washes white as snow. No other fount I know. Nothing but your blood. Nothing but your blood. Only your blood has the power. There is no other fount I know. Jesus, your love made a way. No other fount I know can save. No other fount I know can save. No other fount I know can save. Now by this I'll reach my home, held secure before your throne. This is all my hope and peace, the Son of God poured out for me.
Woo! Amazing. We're all going to razz. This is Travis Cottrell down here on the end, and that was him. And we've got some amazing people for this talk about worship choir and how to get started with that and just what it looks like. And we've got Dave Ware from the Hillsong team. We've got G. Lee from Passion City Church. We've got Michael Neal from Prestonwood. And we've got Travis and Cottrell. And I forgot the name of your church. Inglewood in Jackson, Tennessee. And since we did this last time, my name is David. If you don't know me, myself and Jimmy, we're kind of co-hosting this. We took on the leadership of our choral brand, Brentwood Benson. Anybody know about Brentwood Benson in the room? Okay, we got a few hands. And it's been a journey, and it's been a real honor to kind of get to know all these guys and G as well, just in getting into this world of what choir looks like. Because it's making a comeback. It just doesn't look exactly like it's looked in the past, if we can all agree, right, guys? And so I kind of want each one of you guys to introduce yourself and just tell a little bit of your story and how worship leading connected with choir, mass vocal. Like, how did that happen for you?
Yeah, so, is this on? Can you guys hear me? Yeah, perfect. My name is David Ware, as Goody said. And I'm one of the creative pastors back in Sydney for Hillsong Church, and I get to be part of our Hillsong worship team. I've run our vocal stream at Hillsong Conference for maybe the last 6 years. And so I guess in our church, being a good singer somehow makes you awesome at teaching other people how to sing, which I know is absolutely incorrect, but I just come from a shallow church. What can I say? Yeah, and so I've been dealing with worship teams, vocal teams, choir teams for, about 6 years now. And it's something I love speaking into, something I'm passionate about. And realizing the impact that it has on a worship service and a congregation when we get that aspect right is important, yeah.
Yeah, so when I got saved, I was in a church with about 20 people in our youth group, and basically anybody who could carry a tune could be a part of the worship team. So I was one of like 3, and started leading worship. I think a lot of people may have been in similar situations, but I started leading worship back when I was in high school, and then ultimately one day actually ended up in Sydney at Hillsong College, and then got involved as a vocal student. In your first year, you're automatically put in the choir. And then when I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and then when I moved back to Atlanta, got asked to helped start the choir at our church because somebody remembered that I was involved with the choir at Hillsong. And so I was like, all right. And never in my mind did I ever think that I would ever even think about doing something like that. But it's been an awesome journey and really thankful to be a part.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Michael Neal. I've grew up in a very small church, kind of like what you're saying. God rescued me at a very young age. And I mean, that church was really very conservative, I guess you would say, or not demonstrative. I mean, they only raised their hand to vote on things. Yeah, or against things. Probably more against than or. And then God rescued me again. And a friend had invited me as I was in junior high school to this incredible multicultural Assembly of God church down the way. And I walked in the back of the room, and this 110 voice choir of generational, you could tell there was just multicultural. It was incredible, just a microcosm of the church, really. And it just absolutely peeled paint, and it blew me away, the expression, how it moved worship through the room. And so I was in, and I started doing a little student choir thing as a high schooler, and I found myself leading as a worship pastor in a lot of different environments, some with choir and some without. Now being served here in Nashville for quite a while, and down in Christ Fellowship Church in Palm Beach, Florida, and now find myself in Dallas with a very large choir where it's part of the DNA, and it's just fantastic to have that core of discipleship, that core of community, that sense of family, and I'm absolutely loving it. And it's just an expression that can join everybody together, so it's a blast.
My name's Travis, and I grew up, kind of like Michael, in a small country church in the mountains of North Carolina, Boone, North Carolina, actually. And we were talking at breakfast because G was saying, I grew up, listening to Vineyard, and somebody else said I grew up listening to Hillsong, and I was like, yeah, well, I grew up listening to Bill Gaither. And so, hashtag dad. And so I grew up a little bit of a different generation, but when I came out of college, I graduated from Belmont, and my church that I was attending here in Nashville was about a 6,000 member church, and we lost our worship pastor, and I was 22 years old, and our pastor then asked me to step in as the worship leader and the choir director, and being an idiot guy at 22 years old who knew nothing, I said, well, sure, I will. And so, I was horrible in so many ways, but the thing that God did in that season of my life was just a strike, a match, and a fire, a passion in my heart for not just leading worship, but also leading choirs and encouraging a mindset of choirs being worship leaders themselves, not just people who stand up and sing. And so that was a few years ago. But I've loved doing that ever since. I only was at that church a couple of years, and then I never had the opportunity to have my own choir until many years later when I came to the church where I am now, which was about 8 years ago. And it's a joy. It's something I love to do.
It's awesome. Well, we're going to go back down, and because we just saw your choir on the video. They all came and helped us shoot that day. So what does choir look like at your church?
Okay, so choir at my church, I inherited a church, I inherited a choir when I came to my church that was very established in what they did and how they did it. And it was a nice ministry. It was a great ministry. It was a strong ministry, but it was a ministry that kind of I felt like needed a little bit of a heart turn, not because of their motives or not because of anything that was weird, but just because I sensed that maybe God was bringing us to something new. So what our choir looks like now is we are less presentational, and we are more worship, kind of like a worship leading choir. I use that body. We do sing some songs that are ministry songs that the congregation doesn't sing with us, but by and large, I use that body just to lead my people. We teach our people songs. We work as intercessors over our people as we sing. So for choir for us, I've got about 300 on our roll, which sounds like a lot. We sing about 150 normally, and I have 3 services. And they don't all come to every service. I'm just like, we may have 30 in one service, or we may have 120. It's just like, whosoever will kind of thing. But so we have to just be ready on our feet to carry. Every person carries their own special weight to what we do and their own part of ministry. And so we rehearse twice a week. We come in, we sing 3 services on Sunday morning, and we learn a lot of worship stuff, and that's basically what it looks like for us right now.
And Michael?
Yeah, in our house, I've been there at Prestonwood now for 2.5 years, and it has a storied, tradition of incredible choir music. It's a large mass choir. And, what we have really been about, I think choir, one of the most beautiful things you can do in a choir setting is create culture, not only internally in your worship ministry, but also throughout the church. It's a culture creator if you mind it well. And we have, our choir pastor is actually here, Rick Briscoe, who's sitting back there somewhere, who's been at the church for 25 years and really championed our student choir ministry, our children choir ministry, and on up. But it's a very diverse group, very diverse in age, from 20s up to 60s. And it's an extraordinary thing. When I first got there, and they were introducing me as the new worship pastor, I remember, and I was coming from a church down in Palm Beach, which was a Hillsong family church, and we just absolutely love what God was doing there. We didn't have a choir. But when I walked in, it was like the Lord just really said to me, it's time to move the song from the platform to the people. It has to be a song of the people. It has to be their collective voice rising up. It's their story of redemption. It's their story of healing. It's their story. And so they've got to bring their offering to me. And so you're to be about moving that song from the platform to the people. So everything we're doing now, that's why we did that Songs of the People project. And everything we're doing now is creating the culture that really is about life and health in the worship ministry, and then also bringing that sense of we're coming with an expectation to bring our offering to the Lord. So that's everything we select musically, whether it's 3/4 of what we do probably is all congregational worship, like what Travis was saying. We still do some things that are more presentational and symphonic because we have that ability to do that, and we love to create with that color of the palette. But it's been an extraordinary journey. I'm absolutely loving it.
That's awesome. I love that platform to the people line. That's amazing. Gee.
So our team is actually one of the first teams that you could serve on at our church. Our church is still pretty young, maybe 8-ish years old. I don't know exactly the start date. But it was a place for a lot of our folks to get involved. And of course, the love for singing is there, but we emphasize more what's in your heart and your character, because we spend such short amount of time actually on the platform and on the stage, maybe like 5% of our week. And so we encourage a lot of communication around character and living consistent lives that are on and off the platform. But sometimes our choir is on the stage and sometimes it's on the front rows, and we encourage people in our team, no matter where you're serving on a Sunday, you can still lead worship from where you are, both inside and outside the doors. So it's a mixture of primarily 20-somethings, but we have sprinklings of, I want more like multi-generational in our team, and so we are growing that, and I want to learn from you guys how to do that. But so we have a young church, so primarily a lot of the folks in our choir represent the age group, but we are growing as we get a little bit older in our journey as a church. So is our demographic, and it's really exciting to see all that.
Yeah. We in Sydney, in Australia, we have 30-something locations. I can't remember; it changes from week to week. And that's actually not a joke. I didn't mean that to be funny. And I think we have around 67 services on a weekend between Friday and Sunday night. And so, as you can imagine, that you need a massive creative team to service that. And in Australia, big churches aren't necessarily normal, so big budgets aren't necessarily normal either. And so we find that we need a lot of volunteers to service our church services through our creative team. And I think the last time we kind of did some sort of like a census of our creative team, it was coming up on about 2,500 volunteers. And that's from everyone, but from musicians, vocalists, choir, creative technologies, which is traditionally called production. And that kind of encompasses lights, sound, video. And so you can imagine that on different locations, we have services that have 90 people, in a building worshiping Jesus. And then our main campus in Sydney, which is where I'm based, we have an auditorium that can seat, 4,500 people. And so it looks different from campus to campus. And so on a similar vein to what's already been said, instead of focusing heaps on performance or craft, we definitely put training as a priority, and we want to make sure people are stewarding their gift as well as they can. We kind of center our choir around and our vocal teams around community. And so we, like G said with passion, one of the first places you can belong if you come into church is our creative team. You don't actually need to be a musician, or you can be an artist. You can sing songs at the pub down the road. If you're a creative person, you belong in our creative team. And we gather together every Thursday night. And so we put on training. We get people to come in and do different types of workshops. But like I said, it's not necessarily a craft or a performance thing. What I tell our choir every Sunday is that you are the congregation that's on the stage. You're not there for people to look at you. You're there for people to join in with you. And so that changes some of the aspects. And, we've used the terms congregational and presentational. And I'd say we're the same in the sense that we lean towards congregational, because the worship experience often comes when people are united together in worship, not necessarily when you're kind of looking at a spectacle or being impressed by a bunch of people singing. And so that's what we kind of tell them.
That's awesome. You kind of touched on this a minute ago, and we'll start with you again, Travis, because you've said something to me a couple weeks ago on the phone about this. Like, what are the intangibles that come from the choir? Like, you can say this better than I can, but like, what are those intangible things that come from that permeate your team and kind of are part of your ministry?
Well, I believe, and this goes true, no matter how big or small your ministry is, no matter what your resources are, beyond your love for Christ, if you're going to have a choir, beyond your love for Christ, the next most important thing is your love for your people, because the intangible thing, the biggest byproduct is community and beyond worship. And so I just would encourage you to ask God, if you're going to engage with a choir, if you're going to engage with a group like that, to ask God to magnify your love for His people in your heart. Because that is going to be the root of a successful thing. At the end of the day, if you love them, they really don't care about our music. We don't need any more cool songs. We don't need any cool lights. We don't need all of that stuff if we're not going to love our people well. Yeah. And so community and loving them and asking God to give you a heart for them, and giving them a safe place to love each other well, to study the Word well together, to pray for each other. And then out of that community is birthed a worship and all the intangible things that the Holy Spirit provides from that authenticity that can't be measured. And so that ultimately is the goal for having a choir, not to sound great. There'll always be other choirs that sing cooler songs and sound better. But if you will reach for the authenticity that comes from a real community that's birthed out of a love for your people, love for the people in the heart of the leader, then choir is the greatest part of church, and it can be the greatest part of church. It's always hard. Choir is always hard, but it's always worth it. And so I just encourage you, at the root of everything, ask God, no matter what your resources are. You could have a budget of $10 a year for music. I don't care. Whatever your resources are, ask God to create a love for your people in your heart. And then the Holy Spirit is going to go running, and it's going to be awesome.
So good. So good. Michael?
I think everything Travis said.
Yeah. It's good, man. It was good.
Give me a second. Okay. The interesting part of a choir dynamic, or just having a large group of people singing together, is that when one is weak, the other can be strong for that person. And I believe that musical metaphor, because we have some folks in our choir community that need to be kind of, embedded around stronger singers, right? We'll just put it that way. Was that nice, how I said that? And we have incredibly gifted singers as well, and everything in between. But the fact that they can come together and the ground is level, and they're able to be strong for one another musically, is a perfect picture for the spiritual community that's happening. I had this one story happen in one of our choir situations where a single mom, because of the family group situation we had set in place and the leadership structure and all of that, a single mom had some repairs come up on her house she couldn't afford. She had leaks, she had buckets all in her house. She had all kinds of things that she could not afford to handle. And some of our guys in our choir in the bass section got together, and they got about a dozen guys together. One of them was in construction. They went over and took care of her house for free. And then they, gave her a gift card to take her kids out to dinner. They just fixed everything. I didn't hear about it until 2 weeks later. And that's, to me, just a microcosm, a picture of service and community. And one of the things that Rick, our choir pastor, has done so well is move the aspect of worship beyond the song. And they're serving together in soup kitchens. They're looking for ways to lift up in the community. It really keeps, what happens in those unspectacular places really informs the authority that we have in the platform. And so that service mentality of just giving really ignites what happens on the weekends. It's really beautiful.
That's good.
Echoing everything you guys said too, I think one of the biggest benefits, of course, is community. We've actually had several weddings come out of the friendships that were formed from within the team, so praise God. And during our rehearsals, which are a few and far between these days, but in the early days, we used to rehearse every week and then went down to any time we were on. We're not on every single Sunday. We're about every other week now. And during rehearsals, it was never about learning the parts. That was important, but it was never about that being the focus. It was about ourselves being freed up, because we often talk about how it's free people that free people, and if we're not free, then how are we expected to help free up others? And we've learned a lot about intercession, so I think those are a lot of the intangibles, and when we are standing in front of people, we're able to pick out a part of the room and say, I'm going to be leading this section because I'm going to be praying for that section. So intercession, community, marriages.
That's awesome.
That sounds really good. You can turn that into a .com. I don't know what else to add except for with community. Community just means a whole bunch of people who are in relationship with each other. And our church has existed for 30 years, so 35 years I think it is now. So started before I was even born. I'm 31 at the moment. And I think we've learned a lot along the way, what to do, what not to do, and who to promote, who maybe we should give time before we promote them or get them to serve, or whatever it is that, whatever the next step may be. And I think we've learned the hard way that when someone engages in and shows interest in becoming part of our choir team or our vocal team, or basically any team across church, the first thing we do in our culture is we make it very clear we don't want to be impressed by you, we just want to trust you. And I think that is very important for any church community, for any serving team. And I think with vocals, I guess it kind of tends to lean towards the impress side, because it's a creative gift. It's a very impressive gift. Things happen in the atmosphere when people start singing, and so a lot of people can get attention from their vocal gift. And so the one thing that we do in our community is have relationship, make sure we know the people, and we make it clear I don't need you behind me singing and raving for me to notice you and get you on platform. I just want to get to know you, And I don't want to be impressed by you. I just want to trust you because you're going to be leading people into worship. And the only other thing I'm going to add on top of that is, I've lost it. I've been doing this a lot lately. I've absolutely lost it. We don't want to be, anyways, I'll come back to it. That's good.
Cool. We got a few minutes left. Me included in this question. What's one step that we can take if we want to go down the path of starting a choir? Because going from 0 to 350, 400, like at Prestonwood, that's a big jump. Some of our churches aren't that big, right? And so what's one step that we can take to kind of start that? And you've probably done this more recently than everyone. What would you advise on that?
So I had the amazing luxury of being able to start the choir from scratch. And I said earlier that I never thought about doing this or even desired to do this. And so the first thing was asking the Lord for a vision. Without vision, the people perish. And we constantly have to put the vision before our team as well. Our pastor, Louis, always says, vision has a very short shelf life, and so you have to constantly put the vision in front of the people. But asking the Lord first for vision for you, for the people, for your team. So, of course, I was like, okay, Lord, I'm going to step into this, but I need you to give me the vision. And I actually found this the other day, last night, really late last night when I was looking for something from a previous thing. And this is so cool because I didn't know that I wrote this down, but it was from my journal entry, March 22nd, 2011, the night before first ever choir night together. And it said, I believe tomorrow will mark the first day of what will one day be PCC's team nights and PCC's creative team, and a first of many firsts. And we didn't have, I think we might have had a parking team. We definitely didn't have a choir yet. That was gonna be the next day we were gonna start it. And we didn't have a children's ministry. We didn't have a student ministry. We didn't have a thing called team nights. We didn't have a thing called creative nights. We, 4 or 5 years later, started doing team nights. And just this past year, we started doing creative nights. So I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so amazing. I don't even remember writing this down, but the Lord wrote it down. And if you ask the Lord for a vision, and in his scriptures it also said, write it down plain on tablets, and he will be the one to make it happen. So I was very encouraged. So ask the Lord for a vision, write it down.
Absolutely, that's amazing. I'm going back earlier in ministry when I started at Christ Fellowship years ago, and they didn't have a choir at the time, and the pastor came to me and he said, I feel like we should have a choir. And I said, okay, I'm all in. And in addition to kind of starting with some core leaders and just prayer, we just prayed over, God, what do you want to say and do in this ministry? In terms of a very practical next step, I just said, if you love to sing, if you love to express your worship to the Lord, I'm going to be, and at that time we were building and growing like crazy, and we had a portable building out back, and we put a keyboard in it, and I said, I'm going to be out there, and I'm going to sing some songs, and we're going to worship together. So I want you to come and hang with me. And we're just going to sing together like a family kind of gathering. And we had, maybe 30 or so people show up, and that became the nucleus of what became a very incredible, fun run of ministry together. But it just took an invitation, let's sit down and sing together and gather, and what would it be like? And we kind of said, what would it be like if we were able to build this ministry? And it went from there. Dave, you want to go next?
Next step. I mean, if you're in a church like ours, we don't have auditions. We, like I said, we do a lot out of relationship. We do have vocal assessments, but it's not to kind of go to your next level. And so, if you're in a church like ours, I'd say, if you're new to a team or if you're thinking about joining a team like this, my first encouragement to people is just remember you're a church builder first. Jesus didn't say he was going to build a record label. He didn't say he was going to build a choir or worship team. He says, I will build my church. And I think we trust people like that. And we are very impressed with the character of people that will go, I really want to lead worship one day, but if you need me to do graphics this weekend, I'm all in. Or even if I need to set up chairs. And leaders see those types of things, and we tend to lean on those types of people. And so whatever you can do, or whatever you can teach your people to do, to become those types of people, I think that's when you kind of have a flourishing team, a healthy team, people you can trust, and where God ultimately gets the glory. Yeah.
Pray. Just pray and ask God to show you the DNA of your church and your people. Just because somebody does church this way, somebody does church this way, also choir should look like this for us, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, all of us are here, and you're a leader more than likely, and so we're here and we're doing our best to enter in. This is an example of worship, but at the same time, our worship leader minds are going, okay, so how do I take this to my real life, and how do I make this work for my situation? And you have to keep that same mindset when it's with choir, like not whatever God calls you to do is what you need to do. It doesn't need to look like what's been done before. And God has something for if He's called you to it. Check your motives, check your ambition at the door, and leave it there forever, and just go with whatever the Lord tells you in your spirit about the DNA of your church and how a choir is going to move you forward in for the glory of Jesus, and nothing else about it. It doesn't have to look like anything else you've ever seen, but you really have to bathe it in prayer and ask God to give you a vision for the DNA of your people to lead them well.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Can you guys give each one of these guys a hand? Thank you guys. It's amazing. So next speaker is a good friend of mine, Philip Edwards from Multitracks. He's the founder there, and I'm a power user of what they do, and they're just great friends to us at Worship Together, and he's going to come out and share some news with you guys. So welcome, Philip Edwards.
As Goody said, my name is Philip. I'm the founder of Multitracks.com. And we're located in Austin, Texas, and we're a team of designers and developers, product owners, engineers, and we started the company as a way to resource worship leaders. So how many of you guys use a click track or tracks or have heard of that concept? Yeah, awesome. So we began in 2006 when computers were hardly fast enough to run tracks, but I didn't have all the musicians that I needed in my local church, and we recorded some tracks, and the concept began to take off, and then we went to labels like Capitol and Hillsong and others and asked them, would you guys be willing to release your original artist masters so the worship leaders in churches could use the same tracks that you might use on a Sunday? And it's grown. So now 8,500 songs later, we have original master recordings on the website that you can use to resource your team. And all of those products are really born out of a need that a worship leader might have. So if you've listened to a recording and you've ever thought, gosh, I wish I could hear that alto vocal a little better and send that to my singer, or hear that bass part, turn that up so we could hear exactly what's going on. We create a rehearsal mix for that very purpose. So you can get the original tracks in Planning Center that you can send to your team. If you've ever heard a keyboard player on stage, which you'll probably hear tonight with Hillsong, and you think, man, those key sounds are amazing. I wish I could give that to my keyboard player. Well, that's why we partnered with Peter James from Hillsong to release those keyboard parts. So those are on the site. Multitracks obviously help you fill out the sound of your team. And we wrote an iOS app called Playback that released in 2013. And we've seen over 100,000 downloads of that on the App Store. And churches are using that to run tracks in their worship. And so we're really excited to announce something special that we have added to Playback. It's a new feature. It's probably one of the most requested features that we've received, and we're going to announce it today at Worship Together. So I'll cue the video and show you guys the new Playback.
Add a chorus and delete the refrain. Let's change the key to A.
All right. How's everybody doing? Wait. We're in Tennessee, so I can say, how y'all doing? Don't worry, we didn't pull a magic trick. Philip did not get shorter and fatter. My name is Will. I'm the director of products for Multitracks. Everybody, on the count of 3, shout out your name. 1, 2, 3. I heard Bill. Hey, Bill. Nice to meet you. Well, like Philip mentioned, we have a lot of cool stuff with playback that I want to talk to you about today. But before we do that, last year when we were here, we announced something called Playback Rentals. Was anyone here last year? Okay, yeah. So last year we announced this new thing called Playback Rentals, which makes it more affordable and easier than ever to get multi-tracks in playback, which is really cool. Well, we left the conference and we said, we're getting bored. We need a few new things to do. So our developers sat down and they started working on redoing the audio engine. Now, without getting into too many details, basically think about walking into your house and you have everything set exactly the way you want, but then you need to replace the carpet. So you got to pull out the carpet while leaving everything in place, completely intact, and hope that maybe a lamp doesn't fall over. Well, our developers did that, kind of pulled out all the bits, all the stuff that powers playback, so that we could add a lot of the features that we've wanted to add. So one of the first things we added this year that you can get right now is a brand new click experience in playback. And we had a few people come up to the booth this week and thank us already, so we know it's making a big difference. But the ability to choose multiple click sounds, so you can have a consistent click across all your songs. The ability to subdivide your click, so that if you have a slower song, you can have eighth notes. If you have a faster song, you can take those out, which is really cool. A lot of really neat stuff with click. One of the other big things that allowed us to do is add transitions into the app. So when we talk about transitions, there's nothing worse than being in a worship service. Hey, that's a beautiful mountain. We did not add the mountain. That's coming soon. But when we talk about transitions, how many of you are running tracks currently right now? I think Philip asked this earlier. Okay. How many of you run like some sort of pad content? Okay, yeah, a few people, right? There's nothing worse than being in the middle of a service and playing tracks or having a pad going, and then you go from one song to the next, suddenly there's this beautiful moment, and then everything just drops, right? And you go to the next song. It's terrible. So we added this new transition ability that with the press of one button, you have completely seamless transitions, which is great. So you go from one song automatically into the next. And again, it's just the press of one button, which is really, really cool. Well, one of the other things we did this year that's really nice, we have a completely brand new look to playback. So our designers sat down and we said, well, it's time to lose the leather. It's time to kind of get up to date with things. And so they worked really, really hard to try to make playback work on every single device. So on an iPhone or iPad, no matter what you're using, we completely optimized the look of it and the feel of it, which is cool. The other thing we did, though, is we added a completely brand new song menu experience. So it makes it completely a lot faster to find songs you've purchased, songs you want to do. You can add click tracks. Philip mentioned Peter James and the ability to use pads live. Now you can purchase a pad on our site and load it directly into playback. And because of the transition stuff that we talked about earlier, it's super easy with the press of one button to crossfade from a pad into another song, which is great. But the thing that a lot of people have asked us for is the ability to change key and tempo in app. If you're like me, I struggle to do the song exactly the way it was written. And so every time I get a song, I want to adjust the order. I want to change the tempo, change the key to make it fit better in my set. Well, we worked really, really hard, and the software that we use that allows you to do that is the same software that powers most of the DAWs that you use, recording softwares on your computer. So you can go and you can change a key to any key. You can change a tempo. I believe it's up 20 BPM or down 20 BPM, so you can find the song, get it exactly where you need it to be. And it's going to process offline, and again, using the highest quality pitch change ever. So if you ever change vocals and you start to sound like chipmunks, right, as you go really, really high, or sound like Barry White, when you go really, really low, that's not going to happen when you change the key with vocals. So we make all the hard decisions for you and use the highest quality thing available to do that. So again, over the past year, and including the new stuff that we're talking about in Playback 5.0, we have tons of great new features, built-in click, transitions, the ability to add pads in app like I talked about. So what I'd love everyone to do, does anyone, if you have an iPhone or iPad in here, pull that out real quick. A little crowd participation. It's almost lunchtime. I know we're getting hungry, all right? So everyone grab your phone or iPad. Now, if you have an iOS device, phone or iPad, I want you to go to the App Store and search for Playback. So if you download Playback now, you'll get the free version. You'll get the click stuff we talked about, transitions. You can use it for free. We have a free play of the week. There's I believe, Tasha Cobbs song in there this week that you can use for free. Multi-tracks, take it back to your church, show it to your team. But we'll be releasing the brand new version of Playback, the new look, the pads, the key tempo change here in a couple weeks. And the cool thing is, if you download it now, you'll get that update completely for free. You don't have to pay an upgrade price in order to get those features. So anyway, lots of really, really cool stuff. Like Philip said, it's an honor and privilege to be here. It's a lot of fun for us to be able to create products that help serve worship leaders like yourselves. And so enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you guys. See ya.
Thank you, Will. We give it up for Will, multi-tracks.
I'm going to go with Jimmy.
Are we good? Yeah. Man, just got a couple more things before we dive into lunch, but I'm excited about this opportunity to talk to these guys. We're going to talk a little bit about songwriting this morning. And let me just say, I love multi-tracks. Those guys are great. They're just great partners for church. And man, we use them every week at church. We use the Playback app, and it's such an amazing product. It's changed the way we do things. But we're going to talk songwriting. Any songwriters in the audience? Yeah, I see you guys. We want to get into that a little bit. And so I want to introduce all these guys. So we've got Brett Yonker from the Passion Band in Passion City Church. You can applaud, it's okay.
A smattering of applause. Yeah. But, okay.
Brett, I think your mom was out there. I heard her.
Hey, Mom. How are you?
And Mac Brock, would you welcome Mac? We've got Anna Hellebrandt from Worship Central. And Nick Herbert, also from the UK and Worship Central. Nick and Anna are also part of St. Luke's Gas Street Church in Birmingham, England, the original Birmingham. Not Birmingham, Birmingham. But we thought it would be really cool to just take a minute and talk a little bit about writing this morning. And maybe we start with, because everyone up here is a part of church, and a lot of what you're writing, before it ever goes out beyond the walls of the church, it's happening in your local community. And maybe we'll just, Brett, start with you and we'll walk down, but maybe just talk real quickly, what writing looks like within the context. And I guess in this case would be Passion City Church. And how would songs start there? How would you bring a song to the church? How do you gauge maybe whether you're going to do that song ever again?
Right. Absolutely. Well, for us, we're on a little bit of a rhythm because every year we host a conference for college students called Passion. And so for us, it's a great thing in our flow, in our rhythm, because we always want to bring some new songs there. And then we tend to find that those are the songs that we'll start singing through our church throughout the year. But since Passion City Church started, like G was saying, no one knows. We think it's 8 years old. We found that, church is such a great thing. So I think for us, a lot of it is just thinking about what are we trying to do here, we're not, I don't see our job necessarily as this is all of my creative expression that I'm trying to, express to the world. It is, because it needs to be honest and it needs to be pure. But as a leader and a pastor and a shepherd, I'm running things through the filter of, God, what do we need to say to you? And what do you want to say to us? And what are we walking through as a church? And all of those things begin to kind of inform what songs would be about. And so I think, once a song gets written, we've got it's a big team of people. And honestly, between all of Christian Stanfield's, our worship pastor, Louie and Shelly Giglio, are amazing, so wise, and a lot of other people. If a song can make it through the process, it's usually pretty good. But it definitely goes through a lot of checks and balances before we actually sing it at church. Yeah.
That's good. Mac?
Yeah, that's such a good perspective of the checks and balances thing, because when you're a part of a local church, on the one hand you also have a lot of good source material, because you're walking through something together, you're walking through something with your church body, and so you have a lot of messages that will resonate like with your people that you can start to sing about and start to kind of implement like as the language of your house. But the checks and balances thing I think is just so important. Early on, we would do a lot of like where we would write a song and we'd say, okay, let's try it out at church and just see if it's any good. And kind of hit like a wall of like conviction of, you know, when we're worshiping on a weekend or like that for like a worship experience, for most of our church people, that's the one chance during the week that they're gonna be able to kind of like dwell in worship and kind of focus their attention on the presence of God. And it just was really convicting to us that like we don't want to use that moment in somebody else's life as like a guinea pig moment for a song. And so we wanted to kind of put through the ringer any new song that we were going to introduce. We would introduce it to the staff first, or we would send it out, you know, send out memos to a lot of people to say, hey, is this song good? And we'd dig deep and we'd kind of retweak lyrics or retweak melodies so that by the time we're introducing it to church, feel like we're giving actually like a good offering, you know, to the people, a good offering to God, and that it's like a moment, that doesn't like kind of even take advantage of like the worship experience. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Hello? Hey, thank you. I'm learning so much here. I think so at our church, it's called St. Luke's Gas Street. We started about 2.5 years ago. And I think in the UK, actually songwriting is something that people don't have a lot of confidence in themselves. So we have this really unique opportunity at our church to kind of develop a culture where that kind of becomes part of the norm, part of who we are. And so that's been a really interesting journey. Nick is the creative and ministry pastor or something like that, aren't you? Yeah, and so he's amazing at stirring that up and drawing people out. And one of the things that he runs actually is this night called Kingdom Come. And so basically what we do is we gather, it's on a weekday night, and we kind of open it up to the whole church. And people come along, we sort of prep some musicians to be there, but we don't rehearse anything. So there's one rule for those nights, and that is that you're not allowed to sing any song that anyone already knows. So, yeah, it's pretty scary. And so, it can be really awkward and embarrassing. And then we have these amazing times where the Spirit really leads us in what to say and what to sing, what not to say. Sometimes there's like 10 minutes of silence and someone cracks an awkward joke and we move on, or I don't know, whatever it looks like. But what we're finding is that lots of songs are actually coming out of that place. That song that we did earlier, Stir a Passion, again, just in waiting on the Spirit, Josh just had that whole chorus come straight away, and he brought that to the microphone, and then someone else brings in a different section. So that's been a really interesting way for us as a church to, again, develop that culture, develop a confidence in the Spirit, and develop like an authentic songwriting. Because I don't know about you, but when I go and try and write a song, it just doesn't work so well. But actually waiting on the Spirit and allowing Him to inspire us has been really cool. But you should talk more into the other stuff we do.
Well, yeah, I was going to say about Kingdom Come, so you've stolen my thunder, but I'll forgive you. That's a really interesting journey for us because it is messy, it is awkward. But, someone once said the songs that start as worship end up as worship. And I think that's the key, is you just want to somehow just be real, honest with God, start there. We'll also have intentional songwriting retreats. Where we'll gather a group of people together, we'll go away somewhere nice so that we're inspired by the English countryside. And then we'll just spend a few days just writing songs, pressing into God. So for us, it's a mixture of all of that, from the wildly spontaneous to the quite structured, the quite intentional.
Can I piggyback off of that real quick with the vulnerability and like openness? If you're like a part of a worship team that wants to build some sort of songwriting culture, unlocking that is like so necessary and so key. Because if you've ever been in a room where you're playing a song for somebody for the first time, I don't know about y'all, I'll write a song, and when it's just me by myself, I'm like, man, this song freaking rules. Literally the moment that I strum the first chord in front of somebody else, in my mind, I'm like, oh gosh, this is the worst. And it's getting through that, like, kind of vulnerable, like, all right, I'm sharing something with you. Even if you're in just a songwriting room, the vulnerability of just throwing out a lyric idea that you might have, but you don't know yet if it's a good idea or if it's a lame idea. But to break through that, and that kind of just comes with like doing it a lot, throwing yourself out there a lot, surrounding yourself with people that you trust, and that like kind of, I don't know, handle that vulnerability with care is so key in building like a songwriting like team.
So good. What I found with that is such a good point is you've got to have a heart that's not easily offended.
Yes.
You know, it's so easy to be offended. And probably it's about just all the time keeping it light. Knowing that what could be treasure one day could feel like trash the next. And then what could feel like trash one day suddenly feels like incredible treasure. You know, even Hans Zimmer, the famous composer, he said in the middle of these kind of multi-million dollar kind of composing experiences for these films, you've got to invite failure. You've got to invite failure. And more, I just would want to encourage anyone today, try not to be offended. Invite failure. Leave it all on the field. That is really the only way you can kind of pan for gold and find the treasure out there.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that as well, like something that Nick and Tim Hughes, who's the pastor of our church, are really good at is like separating yourself from the idea. Because so often we can go into these sessions and we're so kind of attached to our idea, and it's come from this deep place, and if you don't like it, then you don't like me, you know. Or it's actually going, no, hang on, I'm secure in who I am in the Lord, and here's my idea. But that's separate to who I am. So yeah, just something else.
That's amazing. And Anna mentioning, of course, Tim Hughes is the pastor of Gas Street, worship leaders pastoring churches. It's a scary thing, but it's actually working out so far.
So far, so good.
Yeah. But you guys have all written songs with influence, written with pastors. And in fact, you know, the church context that everyone here has come out of, as we sat down, I realized, wow, these are all pastors that are songwriters as well. And that's a little bit of a unique perspective. And so maybe we could, you know, maybe start with you, Brad, but like, what does that look like? Because I know when I hear a lot of songs that you guys write, you know, and especially a lot of Mac songs or whatever, I'm thinking like, gosh, that had to be a Stephen Furtick message title. Yeah, right. But maybe talk about how the pastor component factors into your songwriting.
Oh, hands down. I mean, Louis is single-handedly one of the biggest leadership influencers in my life, just personally. And the first time I ever heard Louis talk about Jesus when I was a teenager, as a high school student, I was like, I've never heard anyone talk about Jesus the way that this guy does. Because he's seen Jesus, he's experienced Jesus, and he knows and walks with him. So I have a pastor who loves Jesus. And that permeates through our entire team and our entire church. And so the other piece of that is, I think, especially in a conference like this, it's real easy to think, we're all the music people, and then there's all the preaching people. And that's not how we see things at our church. We are all worship leaders because the point of it is so that we see Jesus. And I do have a pastor who loves music, and like it's important to him. It's a value to him and Shelly both. But we don't segment. It's not like, cool, well, music was happening, so my pastor was grabbing a coffee in the back. Just as equally as when my pastor's preaching, we're not in the back in the green room watching YouTube videos. You know, yeah, hello. Get a little hot.
I feel like conviction settling over the room here.
Yeah. But all that to say is, so yes, worship and preaching are two sides of the same coin. You know, I love the way that Louis has said this for our team, is that the worship goes up when the weight of the gospel comes down. You know, A.W. Tozer says it this way, that when God speaks, a hymn is the musical echo of his voice. And so preaching and worship go hand in hand. When people see Jesus, when there's a revelation of the gospel, of the cross, of the resurrection, that is what unlocks worship in the hearts of people. And so, yeah, we lean into it together, for sure.
So good. Max, so what would, and you guys team wrote a lot when you were at Elevation, and so it was a lot of people bringing. How was Pastor Furtick's component to that? Was it guiding, like, idea-wise, or feel like this is what the church is saying during the season? Or?
Yeah, our pastor. Yeah, so I was a part of Elevation for a long time, and our pastor, you know, he was like heavily involved, not just like throwing out ideas or anything, but just like heavily involved like with the songwriting process. Great, you know, melody maker, great lyricist. And so it was very much like a team effort. But I think also just, kind of going back to what Brett was saying, like the synergy of it is so important, you know, so it isn't, I've met so many churches, where the worship leader and the pastor are almost at odds sometimes, where it's like they're conflicting ideas, or they're conflicting like, well, how do we want to do stuff? You're not really a music guy, I'm the music guy. But I think coming under that kind of just like authority of like the vision that, you know, your pastor has, to come alongside of that and to try to, you know, do something together makes it just so much bigger and like more powerful than trying to do two separate things and just kind of butt them up next to each other. It's like kind of, you know, if we're all entwined in this together, what we're going to do is going to be that much stronger. So.
That's awesome. And Tim is such a novice in the songwriting world. I know he's a drag on you guys. So, do you guys tend to get together, and you talked a little bit about Kingdom Come and letting those new songs come out. Is that sort of your creative process? Is that where it begins for you guys, or do you guys actually organize some times to actually get people together at the church?
Yeah, no, totally. It's a mixture of stuff. So Kingdom Come is sort of a new thing that we're tapping into since we started the church. But I mean, we're all writing at different points individually. Like Nick writes with loads of different people. I carve out songwriting time in the week. I'll co-write with loads of different people. Tim does the same. And then we organize these retreats where we'll try and then draw that all together, particularly if we've got like projects coming up and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, Tim has got a really good, he's got like the bird's eye view on stuff, which is awesome actually. So he's heavily involved with those songwriting retreats and in the songs that he's a part of. But then when it comes to a project, he's got this, I suppose it's an apostolic ability to go, no, this is the right song, track order, we need to push into this more, that kind of thing. But actually, Nick and Tim often, I feel, I mean, you can talk into this if you feel, but write songs that feel like themes of what's going on in the church a bit, like, you know, hope and glory. And do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I always find myself, I'm sure you all do, but you just listen out for those words, those moments that just feel like somehow they put into, they manage to articulate just what the Spirit of God's doing in a moment for a church. And it's one of the most beautiful things when that happens. I remember recently someone in our church just spontaneously praying, you know, God's taking us from glory to glory. And I thought, glory to glory, well, that's a cool, you know, like that. I'd like to write a song about that. You know, it's a great biblical theme. And, you know, so you've got to keep your ears open in this stuff and hear what's being preached, get together, pray. We had a word given to our church right at the start, was that it was going to be woven in worship. The very fabric of almost everything we do, it's all about Him, it's all about worship. So we try and sort of make that a big part of everything we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's a really amazing idea, even on creativity and leadership, is, you know, to be a songwriter, really pastor shepherd, is that you're super observant of what's going on and aware of what is happening around you, and trying to somehow encapsulate that. You know, there's one of these new songs on this Passion record is a song called More Like Jesus. And for me, it was just this prayer of like, God, like I had a lot of pressure going on in my life, like work pressure, personal pressure, just stuff going on. And I was like, God, help me be more like you. And this is what I'm looking at. But then as I'm praying that, I'm noticing that I'm changing. And then we start coming in, working on all these songs, and to see, hey, we need a song that is a song of just surrendering to God and doing that. And so just kind of being aware that like, hey, we need something. And to kind of, you know, I think a lot of us have a lot of notes and different things and places, and we're creative, so we can never find them. But you know it's there. And so, you know, I'd had this thing written down. And so I think that's the thing, is just kind of always trying to catch those thoughts and those ideas and those prayers and to see what God is doing. And so then in the right moment or in the right season, you can say, hey, we've got a confession for this moment, or we've got a prayer for this moment. And so I just think, you know, especially leadership and creativity and all that kind of stuff, is just being open and aware to what's happening around you, and not just being so like right here in your world, you know?
Yeah, that's good. And maybe we've got a few minutes left, but I'd love you guys to talk a little bit about maybe the prophetic component of songwriting out of the church. It's always amazing to me is you find that a lot of times the things that are kind of moving in the church, they happen sometimes first through the songs, and these songs or these messages start moving through the church, and sometimes there's songs it's like a puzzle. Each song is fitting into a piece of what God's saying to the church during a particular season. You know, I think of songs like Oceans, where it's about the, you know, stepping out in faith and new things, and then you know, what a beautiful name, and being just so focused on the name of Jesus. And even recently, we have a couple of different people that we work with, different sides of the world, but wrote a song using the same bits of an old hymn. Had no idea the other ones were doing, and it's just like it's like God just kind of working in all these creatives. But maybe talk about that. Maybe Nick, we start with you a little bit. But you know, do you get any sense, or when you start off in that process, that like, man, I feel like this is really something that, you know, that God's saying to the church right now? Or is it something that maybe that just moves you, and then God takes that at some point and he begins to kind of work it through everyone that he's creating, and there's this theme that emerges that a lot of times we're not aware of?
Yeah, I think for me it's a real mixture of so much stuff. I mean, I'm like an excited puppy when it comes to ideas and the prophetic and what I feel God's saying. So I can sort of go down a lot of different lanes and kind of explore. But I think one of the things I really feel at the moment I'm seeing a lot of with songwriting, and it's just being infused more with prayer. I think prayer is so key to this, and I think we can feel so guilty when we talk about prayer. You know, it's like we all probably could pray more, but I feel that's something, you know, that we're really going to see more of, is that as we pray more, God's going to unlock more and open his hand more, and we're going to write songs like we never have done before. And I think along with that, I would just really encourage you wherever you're at. I know there are so many different people here at different places, some starting out, some thinking, wow, that sounds like, you know, the higher echelons of songwriting, prophetic songwriting. But I think I would encourage you, aim for the unseen. Aim for the things that aren't being done right now. You know, it's so easy to try and just copy what's out there. But I think a lot of the Christian faith is really about the unseen. It's about what we haven't heard yet. You know, no eye has seen, no ear has heard. And I think that is what we've got to press into more and more and more. You know, someone once said this thing about, if you aim at the scoreboard, you never score. And I feel that, you know, I want to encourage you all today. What I feel God's saying more and more is go for the unseen. And that comes from a heart of prayer. It comes from pressing into those places that only you and God go to. And out of that, really, it could be anything. but it's what God's doing in you right now, what you're hearing from him. It might not be what everyone else is hearing, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think my experience of the prophetic in songwriting has largely been out of just being in times of worship on my own with the Lord, and I'll just hit record sometimes and then just go and just see, just worship with no agenda. I'm not trying to write a song, or just worshiping, and I feel like you get to this point where you're suddenly singing stuff that you didn't necessarily think of. And so then I'll often come back to that and go, oh, okay, there might be something prophetic in that. But, a good example, I think, that song, Spirit Break Out, that we did earlier, my husband, Luke, the very tall worship leader, he was a part of writing that song. And really, we were in students group at the time, and he just got together with a friend, and they just had this kind of longing to just see more of God. Really, in our students group, though, it wasn't any bigger than that. And so I have to say, with the prophetic, I do just feel like it's fluke in many ways. That a song like that God just breathed on it. That was completely out of His hands, and I think it was something that more people needed to sing. But how would we know that necessarily? So to sum up that little ramble, I do think it, for me anyway, it comes from a place of just whatever the Spirit is doing in me or in our little community. And the prophetic nature of that is really God. He breathes on whatever He wants to breathe. He has favor on whatever He wants to have favor on, and that's great, So it's a little bit of it's a mystery, but I think that's the beauty of it, and it's just trying to constantly be authentic and tuned in to what He's doing in each of us, and He does the rest. So.
Yeah, that's so good. The mystery aspect is kind of infuriating. Like when you're a songwriter, you're like, I want to write a song. But it is so true. And I would say to even kind of the flip side of what you're saying is that one of the toughest things, like when you're talking about songwriting that no one really wants to hear, but it's just the truth, is that you just have to do it a whole lot. And you have to write a whole lot of songs, and you have to sit down and be diligent about it and not just wait for inspiration to hit, but kind of make it a habit and make it like a muscle that you're working out constantly. And I'm just a big believer that, I just met Luke. I haven't known him very long, but I imagine just even his diligence as a songwriter and working hard at songs so that when God drops something in the moment, he's able to even steward that well because he's got the muscle to carry that weight. And so I think that it's all coupled together how you can, it's because you'll hear songwriters say oh yeah, I just wrote this song in 10 minutes. And you're like, oh, okay. That sucks for me to hear because it's, I've been working on this song for 2 years. But I think that all the songs that are written in 10 minutes, it's because they spent 10 years writing other songs. And so they've got just kind of the ability to maneuver when they feel like inspiration hits. So.
100% amen on that. Yeah, there's a lot of bad songs that I pray you'll never hear that came from me. When we were on tour a couple, maybe 2 falls ago, a couple of us, Christian, Melody, and Pastor Louie, we got to go to a hospital to see a kid named Randall who had cancer. And when we were leaving, he was just this amazing kid. His dad was a youth pastor. He's down in Tampa area. And we were leaving, he said, hey, if there's one thing we could pray for you for, what would that be? And we're thinking, we kind of have an idea. But he totally surprised us, and he said, will you pray that people would see Jesus through my life? And it floored us in such a way because God will answer that prayer every single time. And I think that's the same thing as we're talking about what is the Spirit of God doing here in these songs. The Spirit of God is moving all around the earth and has been for the last 2,000 years to illuminate people to the truth of the gospel. And so if in your songs you're singing about forgiveness and you're singing about the cross and you're singing about the resurrection of Jesus, you're going to have the wind of the Spirit with you. And I think that's what we see and we feel in the songs like What a Beautiful Name. I mean, thank God for that song. And thank God that that song won a Grammy, because it is the story of Jesus. And that has landed in our lives and landed in our hearts, and it lifts up the name of Jesus in such a beautiful way. And so for me, I'm just saying when I come into the moment to work on something or to worship in my room or to pray, is saying, God, just help me get on your wave. You're already doing something in this world. Help me get on your page today. I don't need you to come to my page. I want my page to be your page. So, yeah.
Wow. We can say amen to that. Can we thank these guys for sharing with us today? Thank you. I'm going to let these guys exit out. We're going to make a quick transition. We've got a surprise for you before we head to lunch. But once again, Brett, Mac, Nick, and Anna, could you just tell them how much we appreciate them? Amen. I'm going to be getting out of the way while this heavy thing is going to be lifted up on here. This next surprise we have for you guys, you know, there's been a few things and times, I think, in worship music in our lifetimes where we've seen, you know, God do some unique things, and He's used certain people and movements to bring about things, you know. And I think of, you know, things like, you know, the Jesus movement that, you know, for those of us that were maybe old enough to be around in the Keith Green era and the things that were happening there, what God was doing through worship in the Calvary Network. And then, you know, even in the early, you know, probably early 2000s, you know, the UK influence with Delirious, Matt Redman, all of that really shaped and changed what was happening in worship. And but before Delirious came and did what they did, there was another artist and another voice that I believe really changed the direction and the trajectory for what God was doing in the churches in worship. And that was through Michael W. Smith. Would you welcome Michael?
What's up? Woo! Can we just do a couple things? Is that okay? I'd love to have a monitor. Maybe I could hear something. Where would I run to the throne of mercy? Where would I sing along? But at the cross of grace. How great the love, how strong the hand that holds us. Beautiful, so beautiful. So here I bow, come on, to lift you high. Jesus, be glorified in all things. For all my life I am yours, forever yours. There is a King who bore the scars of healing. There is a Son came in grace and truth. How great the love that carries us to kindness. wonderful. You're wonderful. So here I bow to lift you high. Jesus, be glorified in all things. For all my life I am yours, forever yours. So here and now, be lifted high. Right here and now, be glorified. God of heaven and earth, God who brought me back to life, I am yours, forever yours. God here and now, be lifted high. Right here and now, be glorified. God of heaven and earth, God who brought me back to life, I am yours, forever yours. So here I bow to lift you high. Jesus, be glorified in all things. For all my life I am yours, forever I don't know anybody, at least personally, that said that 2017 was a great year. Maybe there are a few exceptions, but it's been a tough year for the Smith family. Tough year politically and racial divide and on and on and on and on. And so I've been praying for miracles this year. We believe in you. We believe in you. You're the God of miracles. We believe in you. We believe in you. You're the God of miracles. We believe in you. We believe in you. You're the God of miracles. We believe in you. We believe in you. You're the God of miracles.
milagroso Dios. Yo creo en ti, say, yo creo en ti, oh. Yo creo en ti. Eres milagroso Dios. Sing to the Lord, yo creo en ti. Yo creo en ti. Yo creo en ti. Eres milagroso Dios. Yo creo en ti. Yo creo en ti. Yo creo en ti. Eres milagroso Dios. Say, I believe in you, Lord. I believe in you. Yes, I do. I believe in you. You're the God of miracles. Thank you, Lord, yeah. I believe in you. I believe in you. You're the God of miracles. Turn it around. Yes, you are, God. Turn it around. Thank you, God.
When we're in the heat of the battle, sometimes we just need to be reminded that He's got this.
Yeah. Amen.
We know how the story ends.
Yeah.
So we ran across this song. I know you did it last night, but we're going to do it again. This is how I fight my battles.
Yeah.
This is how I fight my battles.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
This is how I fight my battles.
Thank you.
This is how I fight my battles. Just when you think you're lost, it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you.
Oh, Lord.
It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. 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 It may look here, it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. 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 Yeah. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how we fight our battle. This is how we fight our battles. This is how we fight our battles. This is how we fight our battles. May the Lord bless you, keep you, make his face shine upon you, be gracious unto you. Lord, lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. May the Lord bless you with favor. Lots of favor. May you walk this thing out in extreme humility. And I believe that the best days are ahead for the church. God bless you guys.
Amazing. I didn't know he was going to show up till like a week ago. That was awesome. Well, we were running a little behind, and so we're going to need to do lunch fast. But before we talk about lunch, who all was here last year? Okay, come on. Thank you for coming back.
Absolutely.
If you were not here last year, Darren Whitehead gave a talk the first night about the 7 Hebrew words of worship. And that talk has kind of turned into a book called Holy Roar, and it's out there in the lobby. And we wanted to find a way for you to be able to take that back for your team and use it as a way to kind of put your team in a position to kind of come together and go through that together. So you can buy one book for $15, or you can buy 10 for $100. So that's like $5 off a book. And so we really want you to be able to take that back. Darren wanted you to be able to take that back. And so make sure you go get that. Like, we don't have a ton of them, so first come, first serve. But, I mean, that talk and just those words, we've gotten emails from a lot of you that were here last year. Those on our team, like even in my church, the way that God's continued to use that talk has been amazing. And so just make sure to pick that up. And so, yeah, I'm excited about Darren's talk tonight as well. It's going to be incredible. What are we doing for lunch, Hunter?
So lunch. Can I see how many people were here again last year? So a couple, same thing as last year. We have 11 or 12 food trucks out there. Some of Nashville's best. So go out there, find the one that you want, get it. Theater and courtyard are open down the middle hallway where the sponsors are. So you can eat in there, you can eat in the courtyard, meet some new people, enjoy some fellowship, and we'll let you know when doors are going to reopen. We need to clear the room completely for a set. So if we could kind of make your way out and go grab some food, and we'll be back in here for that.
We're going to do our best to do 1:30, but
yeah,
it may be a few minutes
Try
later.
to get back around 1:30. You're not going to miss how we start.